Hello and welcome to The Radical. I'm Christina.
And I'm Nicole. On our podcast, we delve into the roots of metaphysical wisdom.
That's right, Nicole. Our podcast is all about exploring those fundamental truths and practices that nourish your mind, body, and spirit.
Yes, Christina, we want to make metaphysical concepts easy to understand and accessible, especially for those who don't have a ton of time to do all the research.
Right? We'll do the research as well as share our experiences and perspectives, hoping to empower you, our listener, to find balance and magic in your day-to-day.
Inspired by the essence of the word radical, proceeding from the root, let's explore the roots of well-being and self-healing together.
This is The Radical with Christina and Nicole, two metaphysical girls in the material world. Hello, welcome to the Radical Podcast. I'm Christina.
And I'm Nicole.
Today in our podcast, we're talking about the astrological sign of Gemini. I have a lot of Gemini in my life, a lot in my stars, but we're going to talk about that a little later in the podcast. Today we're going to start with my list. I've got a whole list of facts and correspondences and things about Gemini. Segment 2, Nicole, what are you going to talk about?
I am talking about Uranus's transit into Gemini this summer, July 2025, and going a little bit deeper with some Gemini themes. I'm sure you're talking about Gemini ruling communication, but what about our internal communications? And then a little bit about AI.
Oh, AI, the wave of the future, the unknown for a lot of us, or the scary for a lot of us, right? AI.
It is, yeah, I think for a lot of people scary, but it it's happening. The train has left the station.
Yeah. For segment 3, for the message from the universe, I was so excited to go and look at my tarot cards in preparation for this podcast, and I just grabbed the Wild Unknown Animal Spirit Oracle deck. This was one of my first ever decks. I've got 3 cards waiting for us. So that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to talk about today, listeners. We're going to talk about Gemini. And I got into a rabbit hole. And I've been like going into a rabbit hole and then actually like walking through the looking glass on some concepts. Nicole and I were chatting before I hit record, and I was like, just like I did enough research that I completely changed my mind on what I thought Taurus was. I completely went through the looking glass and changed my mind on what I thought Gemini was.
Mm, that was like me with Saturn last week. I had this whole experience where Saturn took on this completely different persona.
Yeah. They become clear to us. And I love digging into history, but I feel like now that I'm in a place where I've been doing so many different avenues of research that I'm starting to tie it all together. So we will present to you listeners some information, and then, you guys can decide for yourself. That's the joy of it, right? So I'm going to start. I'm going to start with the dates of Gemini. The 20th of May to the 20th of June, 2025. Within that time frame, there's a new moon in Gemini on May 27th. New moon for Geminis is a time for dreams and taking actions and setting goals. The full moon within our Gemini season is on June 11 at 3:44 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. This full moon is known as the strawberry moon, and I'm pretty sure it's because strawberries are in season. we are getting into, like, that's why we talk about May 1st and May Day. We talk about it being the festival of flowers and fruit, because it's like everything is just starting to come in. So it's a perfect time to make some flower arrangements and find out what's fresh and local in your area, and just take a meal on that day to enjoy your local seasonal produce. The energy of Gemini is a time of social engagement. Gemini season is a great time to connect with loved ones, social events, and build relationships. That is why I think that Beltane and May Day continues to be such a secular event outside of, the historical side to it, because it is a beautiful time of year to get outside and go to local community events. It's also a good time because, as we're going to talk about the qualities of Gemini, it's a good time for intellectual stimulation because it's an air element, and that encourages curiosity and learning. There's also a lot of playfulness with Gemini, and versatility, adaptability, and travel and adventure. I think that's tied to the actual temperature and the blooming and ripening and outdoors calling us, depending on where you live in the world. So that can have a huge part to it. But also, that is the air energy during that time of year. I think it affects us all a little differently. But just be aware of if you're feeling the energy affecting you, or if you're not feeling the energy and you want to get involved, look at community events, look at studying something, or look at going somewhere in Gemini season to get that energy flowing. The planet of Gemini is Mercury. Mercury governs communication, personal exchanges, quickness, and mental power. You know what? Communication and Mercury, I wanted so badly to go down a tangent and talk about the communication gods and all the ancient civilizations, but I'm going to save that for the podcast that we're going to do specifically on Mercury, because we're going to do all the planets now. Okay, so the ruling planet is Mercury. Exalted in Gemini is the North Node. Detriment in Gemini is Jupiter. And the fall in Gemini is the South Node. The element is air. The quality is mutable. I'm going to read this bit of information from Jessica Davidson. And she's got a beautiful website on astrology. You can find her very easily. And she says, as a mutable air sign, Gemini provides the ability to know and understand reality. If Aries stands for the subject and Taurus stands for the object, then Gemini is the relationship between these two, the knower and the known, giving rise to a third, knowledge itself. The Gemini twins represent duality and communication, which can only happen when there are two. That is a beautiful quote. Again, Jessica Davidson. She's got a beautiful website on astrology. But that summed up, because we're going down the year. We started in Aries, now we're in Taurus. And then you could see how the story is growing and building on the zodiac journey through the year. Polarity for Gemini is positive, yang, projecting, right side of the body, the future, moving forward. The chakra associated is the throat chakra, which is associated with communication, self-expression, and truth. Day of the week is Wednesday, which is Mercury's day, which is a good day to have a meeting or a good day to record a podcast. The number for Gemini is 5, which is often associated with change and freedom and curiosity. You could see how that's in the Gemini realm, which is closely tied to Mercury. 5 can signify a willingness to embrace new experiences, explore possibilities, and move forward with courage and adaptability. And then, 5 in the tarot deck is often a challenging number. and a lot of the minor arcana. You could see that 5 is also a symbol of transformation and time of change. The body parts for Gemini are the lungs, arms, hands, fingers, nervous system, and also the respiratory system and the thymus gland. The color for Gemini is yellow. That's their lucky color. It's intellect, reason, concentration. And to me, yellow is like energy and creativity. It can symbolize all of that. And it is the color of some of the most beautiful flowers that are just popping off outside during this time of year. Okay. The metal for Gemini is Mercury, because Mercury is a metal, as we know, in thermometers. So spiritually and historically, Mercury has been something that has been studied throughout all cultures. Mercury is seen as the bridge between fixed salt and volatile sulfur, these two aspects of the self, symbolizing the non-binary and androgynous nature. That's an alchemy. Liquid's Mercury state and ability to vaporize symbolize the constant flux and change of the world within ourselves. And its volatility represents the need to be flexible and adaptable and face change. And then in some traditions, Mercury can be seen as a conduit between the visible and the invisible worlds, connecting the physical and the spiritual realms. So Mercury as itself, as a metal, very fascinating. Lots of history there. Symbology and mythology for Gemini. I'm not going to get, I always go down a rabbit hole. And this, right, with mythology, because I adore history and mythology and learning about the beginnings of things. And this is when I went down the rabbit hole and through the looking glass. But I'm going to keep it succinct today because we will talk about more about it. So Gemini is Latin for twins. The concept of twins in mythology goes back to the Paleolithic age and even further. As human beings, we're fascinated by twins, and we use twins as a representation in our stories in different ways across the world, across the globe. And maybe one of the earliest ideas we ever used in our stories was the ideas of twins. Duality is fundamental to reality, and creation myths of ancient cultures reflect that truth. Many feature twin gods. I mean, if you did a search for twin gods, you would get a list as long as you could want to look at. And then historically, it generally was brother and sister, because it was truly about the dual nature of yin and yang. And it stood for dual principles of the universe. Unity becoming duality, becoming many, but it was contained in a wholeness. It turned into brothers in the Greek and Roman times, and then it became very, very brotherly from there on forward. But a lot of the older versions are brothers and sisters, is a yin and a yang. The twins can represent a sacred marriage or a sacred connection or a sacred coming together of inner and outer, mind and body, masculine and feminine, yin and yang. Neither side is dominant. The still, quiet center in between the two is the higher true self. So this makes me think of pillars. And what were we just talking about, where there are pillars everywhere? And the symbolism of tarot. Pillars representing portals and gateways and doorways. I mean, even the Gemini glyph can be looked at as pillars, but they're connected. So doorways, thresholds, lots of pillars, cycles, light and dark. But then there's also, so that's one element of it. And then there's the rose, which is the beauty and the thorns. That's another symbol of Gemini. And then I saw so many times symbols of Gemini as butterfly because of the two wings and like the center part of the body and then the two wings, and then birds. But that also is tied deeply to the air element, which totally makes sense. That imagery was used for Gemini.
You know what dawned on me as you were telling us about the twins? Luke and Leia are twins. They're not
Yes.
just brother and sister, they're twins.
So even modern storytelling, twins. And they didn't have to be twins, but it works when you're trying to tell a story of something being the same but opposite. Twins in storytelling is very, very powerful. And we as a human culture are loving it. The glyph of Gemini is two upright parallel lines joined at the top and the bottom. The duality of the sign also implies a unity. The twin pillars are bound together, connecting heaven and earth, suggesting the link between the worlds to be found in the human mind. And you could find that glyph on your smart devices and in your all that stuff. It's also the Roman numeral 2, which makes sense. The constellation in Egyptian astrology, the Gemini constellation was called the two stars, or Pamahi, which means the united. In our Western culture, the two bright stars are called Castor and Pollux from the Greek myth twins, which both happen to be males because that's what the Greeks did. And that was named by Ptolemy when he was doing the classic constellations. And Gemini is best seen in the winter and the spring months in the northern hemisphere. The house ruled by Gemini is the third house, the house of communication, childhood. Nicole and I chatted about this in the Houses podcast, that the third house is often sibling chatter, like the type of communication you had in your home and around you when you were young, and how that created a pattern and an understanding in your life moving forward. The virtues of Gemini energy, when that energy is balanced: communicative, friendly, creative, multifaceted, decisive, curious, versatile, expressive, dynamic, imaginative, jovial, and charismatic. The flaws of that unbalanced Gemini energy is changing opinion a lot, volatile, fickle, scattered, restless, irresponsible, unfaithful, liars. I always gossipy, easily bored, two-faced, and impatient. And this is another little excerpt I took from, let me find her name, from Jessica Davidson. Gemini appears to be split into two, between intellect and emotion, light and dark moods, introversion and extroversion, masculine and feminine, spiritual and material, rational and mystic, and so on. This is true for everyone. But with Gemini, it's the central archetype driving their experience, and they may struggle to understand themselves as a result. People with Gemini in their star charts, wherever it is placed, everybody look at your star charts and figure out to see how that can play into them, but also as Gemini energy. Tarot cards in the major arcana, I'm trying to think of a word I want to say for generally, typically, classically, it's called the Lovers, but I have begun calling this card the Twins or the Pillars. I told Nicole the other day that I started just calling it Gemini in my mind. That card, I call it the Gemini, because to me, I have a clear definition of Gemini now, and I'm starting to apply that more to the card formerly known as the Lovers. I'm kind of like expanding out what that tarot card represents in my eyes. It could be relationships, and that could be romantic, personal, business. It could be any kind of relationship you enter with another person. It could be your relationship with yourself, big time. And then anytime there's that duality, then we're talking about harmony. We're talking about personal beliefs, choices, decisions. That card can make us all sit back and reflect on where we're standing in between two pillars, or are we about to walk through a doorway or a threshold, making a decision, or the beginning or the ending of a cycle. So that's the twin.
In my Medicine Woman Tarot deck by Carol Bridges, it describes this card as a balance taking place within you.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoy it. And the card is renamed Ecstasy.
Oh,
And I think
nice.
that's the result of harmonizing the duality within yourself.
Yeah.
Because that's the first step in being able to harmonize with other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I look at this card very differently now. And if you get this card in reverse, or you're feeling resistant, or you're just, here's a question: how can I love myself? Not how can I love my partner, not how can I find love. No. The question you ask yourself when this card is reversed or you're resistant to it is, how can I love myself? The three cards and the minor arcana associated are swords cards, because air. And that's the Eight of Swords, which is Jupiter and Gemini, which can be self-imposed restriction, victim mentality, or feeling powerless. The question you can ask yourself with that card is, how do I save myself? The Nine of Swords, that card is a lot to think about if you ever get that card. Mars in Gemini, which can represent or mean anxiety, worry, fear, anguish, depression, nightmares. The question to ask yourself there is, how can I shift my perspective? Ten of Swords, Sun in Gemini, painful endings, bottoming out, betrayal, loss. I see this as the end of a cycle. You need to put something to bed. You need to let something go. So I've read it, death of the ego, or death of a part of the ego. And the question is, how do I end this kindly? A lot to chew on there with those tarot cards, and a lot for me to think about with my new understandings of this duality, and very much not the relationship between a person and a person, but the relationship between me and myself.
So to start segment 2, Uranus moves into Gemini on July 7th, 2025. Uranus, the planet, is our innovator, our disruptor, but also brings liberation and a sense of rebellion. And I shared this on the Taurus podcast from moonomens.com. In a world that thrives on a fast pace, which makes me think of Gemini air energy,
Mm-hmm.
ongoing stimulation and constant exchanges of data and information, the most revolutionary choice is often to slow down, to pause, to tune into what our bodies actually need before we make a decision or take action. This is a time to reconnect with the wisdom of our physicality and trust our inner timing, even amidst chaos and uncertainty. So Christina mentioned Gemini ruling the nervous system, and this includes the way we're breathing.
Mm.
And what this little bit from Moon Omens made me think of is, I know I've said this before, but for me, it's about engaging in self-care that moves the dial, actually changing our physiological state and making an impact on our nervous system. So if we're in an activated state or a triggered state, we are changing that state by changing our physiology. And we can do this through breath work.
Mm-hmm.
So self-care that moves the dial. And I've heard astrologers talk about the summer of 2025 really because of Gemini moving or Uranus moving into Gemini. It's going to feel kind of chaotic and busy in terms of like the mental chatter and what is happening on, for example, like social media platforms. So this is a good time, sort of in preparation for that energy, to start considering and making decisions about what we will and will not participate in or take in or consume, more so on a mental, emotional, and energetic level. Setting our boundaries and our limits with how we watch the news or take in the news. I only read the news. I've deleted nearly all my social media apps, and not just the app, but my account. I do not wish to participate in the insanity or the chaos of those spaces. And one of my favorite astrologers, Pam Gregory, talks about the eagle's perch of observation, where you don't energetically engage. So maybe you're reading the news, but you're not letting your energy and your emotions get wrapped up in the narratives that are being
Mm-hmm.
told. And she also says, Pam says, starve out the scary, love in the good. So we are not giving our energy to the fear-based narratives that are showing up on our news feeds or our social media feed. We're kind of leveling up energetically when we set those energetic boundaries and how we engage mentally, emotionally, and energetically. And I think that really ties into the energy of Gemini.
Mm-hmm.
I've also heard astrologers talk about two timelines emerging. And this might sound kind of woo-woo, and that's because it is. Um, but I think we can all agree that this is a time of, there's a lot of shifts, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of duality that we can sense and perceive and observe, especially in our country. So the two timelines that are emerging, I kind of think of this as sort of energetic timelines. And we have free will and choice over sort of which wave we get to ride. Do we surrender and kind of trust the divine flow, which would be one timeline, or are we going to fight and resist and be full of fear? And that would be another timeline. And this makes me think of the high vibrations, or those virtues, like Christina calls
Mm-hmm.
them, and the low vibration of each sign. And that kind of, I think, explains some qualities that the zodiac signs and the planets offer us and help teach us how we can ride these waves, if you will. So for Gemini, the high vibration is joy, dynamic type energy, how we can change and sort of further develop ourselves, and being versatile, adaptable, and proficient. Low vibration, disconnection, and not listening. And I think not listening includes not listening to our inner self, our wisdom, and our intuition. As an air sign, Gemini's energy moves quickly. So sort of the lesson here is considering our connection to our nervous system and if we're feeling centered and grounded, or if we're starting to feel swept up, swept away, if we're having sort of brainstorms, experiencing states of overwhelm, that's a good cue that we are not centered and grounded and our nervous system is activated. And to conclude my mini section here, we've come full circle back to the lesson of how are we breathing? And I mentioned at the beginning our inner dialogue with ourselves. So if Gemini rules communication, I think it's important to remember this means our inner communication and inner talk tracks as well. Gemini's energy supports us in rewriting and examining old narratives. So, what stories are we telling ourselves? What are things we tell ourselves that feel so true that we might not even realize they're a belief that we can change? And we did this podcast. This was one of our first podcasts like a year ago. So, one of my really old notes, well, not really old, but an old note from last year, I had an example. And what I wrote down a year ago for my old stories and old narratives, I wrote down perfectionism and feeling good enough. And what I was doing this time a year ago was having to record meditations for my yoga nidra certification. And I was having to do my qigong videos as well. I was dreading it. Me and you were starting this podcast, and it felt like so much vulnerability all at the same time. And I didn't feel like I was good at the podcast, and I didn't feel like I was good at teaching Qigong or doing a meditation. And all these old stories of like, well, don't bother doing it unless you're going to be perfect came up. I also wrote down on last year's notes, when we change our stories, we can change our reality. Our brains have a negativity bias, so we have to hunt the good. We have to look for the good things. And then I wrote down positive affirmations help train your brain. And this is exactly what me and you are in the middle of exploring. We have a podcast coming up in like 3 weeks, I think, on our affirmation challenge. We're doing affirmations for 30 days, and we're going to tell you, our listeners, if anything changed and how it went. So just the synchronicity here was cool. AI. Google's AI is called Gemini. I didn't know that a year ago. I'm sure that is not new information for a lot of you listeners. The name's meaning of twins has a twofold significance for Google's AI model. It can generate text and also write creative content and translate languages. So, sort of playing on that multifaceted quality of Gemini. It also acknowledges NASA's Project Gemini. This was a 1960s program that tested technologies that were critical to the Apollo moon landing. So, in using the name Gemini, Google is seeing this as a parallel between their role with Gemini paving the way forward in AI and how NASA did the same thing with space exploration and its Apollo missions. Sedna began her long stint in Gemini almost a year ago,
Yeah.
April 2024. And because she has such a long orbit around the sun, like 11,000 years, she will be in the sign of Gemini until 2065. She's one of those dwarf planets. And we did a whole podcast on her. She's associated with isolation, sacrifice, and deep transformation. She's associated also with kind of altered states of consciousness, connection to the spirit world, and shamanic energy. She represents the hidden aspects of ourselves and ancestral like trauma, lineage healing, and past wounds. And I listened to a talk that suggested with Sedna's placement in Gemini, we are going to see a huge rise in the use of artificial intelligence, which even in this last year, from the time I wrote these notes to us re-recording today, I have noticed a rise in the use of AI, even just personally in my day-to-day life. But what I found really striking about the talk I listened to was this person said a rise in AI will inevitably promote a consciousness revolution. The idea being that AI will free up our time and our energy on like the mundane day-to-day tasks, and that as a consciousness revolution is ultimately a spiritual revolution. And that for me completely changed how I saw AI and how I use AI, because before hearing that talk, I was convinced AI was like evil, 2001 Space Odyssey, it was going to kill us. And I was very, very fearful. And I hear people still talk about AI with a lot of fear and worried about things like, is it going to take my job? Is it going to be
Yeah.
my kids, teacher in the future? Is it going to be what educates us? Are we going to lose our creativity and our critical thinking? And is it going to do all of our writing and no one's going to know how to write anymore? I hear a lot of fear.
Well, either you said it before we hit record or you said it at the beginning of the podcast. The train has left the station. We can't put it back in the box. AI is here. I think we all need to learn about it, understand it. Ignoring it isn't going to make it not be a part of our lives. And we should have a choice on how we use it, or mindfully don't use it, is where I am with it. My search engine is Google, and Google gives me summations generated by Gemini. So parts of this podcast were generated by Gemini, which I then read, looked at, surmised, used as a launch pad to look at something else, turned my research in another direction, told me exactly when the full moon was in, June. It's when I search for information, that's what I'm using is now is Gemini. There used to be a time you would Google it and you would get articles and then you would read the articles, right? And now you Google something and now you get a summation and then the articles. So I could just skip over it, but I don't. I generally read what what was given to me. I don't have it on my phone though. I don't have Chat GPT. I'm not 100% clear what that is sometimes. I know it's an app. So I've only used it AI in my daily life in searching. I understand everybody's concerns for it, but I think we need to learn about it and understand it before we make sweeping judgments on it, because I don't think it's going to go away.
I don't think it's going to go away either. And I think there are, like with anything, positive applications and then
Mm-hmm.
applications that are maybe more concerning and have the potential to be detrimental. But I know for me, it's been really helpful in deep diving some, like with my health journey, because I'm not a doctor. And the time it would take to read
Mm-hmm.
the volume of articles and information, it would just be so overwhelming. And what ChatGPT can do is sort of synthesize all that and provide that summation to me, which is very helpful, I think, and is a positive application, is help me get through all this information,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it saves me time and energy. And if something is interesting to me, it cites its sources, and I can
Mm-hmm.
follow that link and go read that full article. So it'll be interesting to see with Sedna and Gemini, with Uranus and Gemini, what kind of happens with these platforms. And I think artificial intelligence and social media sort of falls within the realm of Gemini. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But like everything else, and sort of what I was talking about a little bit earlier with setting your boundaries and going ahead and deciding preemptively where your limits are and how you will and will not engage with certain things when it comes to these applications that deal with like our intellect and our thinking and our communication, we have to set our own limits.
Mm-hmm.
And one way I love using AI is astrological placements and transits with my birth chart.
I know. We were discussing this right before we hit record, and I had omitted one piece of my birth chart, and then I just went to my Google and I just typed in Leo in Venus in the third house, and Gemini AI gave me a perfect little paragraph. So it is really convenient in that way.
Would the astrologers who have spent years and years and years of their
I know.
life appreciate this? I don't know. And
I
that's
know.
maybe a topic for a future podcast, because there's also a question of intellectual property, and is AI using the hard creative work freely given by people on the internet, friends on the internet that are sharing this information, but then they don't get that credit or recognition that I
Yeah.
wrote this and this kind of came from years of study and personal experience.
Yeah. Well, AI is getting it from somewhere. It's not, I mean, it has received all the information that is available to it, and then it spits it back out. So it has learned from what people have published. That is where it gets its information. So that is what's happening.
So we'll keep our eyes open and we'll see what happens. But in my birth chart, I have one Gemini placement, and that is Chiron in my eighth house. The eighth house is the house of transformation, intimacy, and mysteries. And Chiron is our point of pain, but also healing. Another way to think of Chiron is that core wound that once we heal it or begin to heal it, the wound becomes a source of wisdom and a teacher, and maybe empowers us to teach about the thing that hurt us and how we healed it. So specifically with Chiron and Gemini, this wound could feel like your voice doesn't matter, sometimes literally, and sometimes more emotionally or mentally. So this could be the physical, like people talking over you, people telling you to be quiet and kind of shutting you down. Or this could be like your ideas don't matter, you get dismissed, you get minimized, and so on. The gift of this placement is becoming a wounded healer through speaking, through connection, through sharing ideas. The eighth house adds this theme of fear of vulnerability. So it's learning how to sort of move through that vulnerability and speaking, writing, or teaching from the heart kind of anyway. And something that I've been thinking about a lot in many different contexts, but you know, these wounds, it's like you don't heal them and they don't go away. You heal them in the way that Gemini acknowledges duality, right? You hold both. You begin to have the capacity to be two different things at the same time. You begin to say, I really am uncomfortable being seen, but I'm going to try to do it anyway. Which, when I was looking at my notes from last year and I was so afraid to record my videos, and we were starting this podcast, and it felt like so much vulnerability and putting myself out there so much. People were seeing me and hearing me, and I was like, oh, this is like very overwhelming. It's not like that went away. It's not like I healed that and now I'm 100% comfortable being vulnerable.
Yeah.
You just learn how to honor both. I can be seen and also be really uncomfortable being vulnerable. I don't have to pick and choose. I get to be both. I get to have the capacity to be these two conflicting things at the same time. And I think that is a Gemini lesson.
Yeah. That's Gemini. You got to put your arms around all of you, not just half of you or just that one part or that other part. Well, I'm very Gemini heavy. My sun and ascending and Mercury are all Gemini in the first house. You know, I want to talk about something I've learned about myself as we've been on this astrological year journey. And I find my unbalanced Gemini energy um popping out, and I feel it. And what I have learned as I have been on this journey is, really what my moon sign means and my strong Jupiter placements. I've been on my Jupiter journey and I've been talking a lot about it, that I have put my arm around my Gemini self, but I've also been putting my arm around my other aspects of my birth chart and my moon sign and my strong Aries placements. So when I'm feeling like I can't hold on to this, like sometimes this Gemini energy it's like I can hear myself sounding unbalanced and saying things I don't want to say, and it's like I can't stop it. It's like it's like another person is inside my brain running my mouth. I don't even know how to describe it. I'm sure we've all probably felt that in moments of happiness or moments of anger. But in any case, I've learned to hold on to that Gemini energy and really putting more time in cultivating my moon energy, which is Sagittarius. And when I'm feeling restless or I'm feeling bored, Then I get into I need to travel and I need to learn, and I make sure my mental health is being taken care of and that I'm having the right proper outlets for that air energy that is spinning around me. And then the other part for that overabundance or that unbalance of that Gemini energy, when I look at my strong Aries placement, then I get into this element of going for a walk, physical fitness, doing something with my body to get out of my head. So I'm putting my arm around my whole self, and I'm really taking care of, like, I'm making sure that my Gemini energy is staying balanced by using the other elements that I have to help balance it out.
That's
That is,
very bizarre of you.
yeah, well, I'll sometimes it that the air and the Gemini, it can be intense. And I mean, to go off on another tangent, we've mentioned sometimes about how much we love doing retreats and being in social environments and being surrounded by other people who want to get together and have lectures and talks on things we care about. And I have to be really careful with my energy in those scenarios, because I will often in the past, I have gotten very talkative and then I've regretted it afterwards. Not in a way that I said something I regretted, but because that wasn't what I needed in that time. That was just the unbalance of my air energy looking for a way to express itself when I needed to be listening, not talking. That's when I'm unbalanced in my Gemini energy. And I've learned that about myself. And I mean, I'll still do it. And I was like, I needed to be listening to her, not talking at her. Right? I'm sure we've all been there. That is the duality of this Gemini energy. And then my third house is Venus and Leo, which I just Googled before we started talking. And that is, and Gemini AI said that third house in Venus and Leo suggests a person is creative, expressive, and enjoys social interaction. Thank you. Thank you, Gemini. See, it'll give me an answer, but I'm the one who has to interpret it. I'm the one who has to, dig into it. So, that's a Gemini, listeners. I enjoyed putting this together very much. I want to talk more about Mercury. I want to talk more about the what I'm now calling the twins card, the lovers card. I can't wait for our season on tarot. We're going to just have so much fun with that. But listeners, we hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Honestly, I went through a looking glass. I came out on the other side of this research with a whole nother view of another facet of Gemini energy. Message from the universe: the spirit animals are waiting for us. There's 3 cards: A, B, or C. Card A is the butterfly.
Wow.
Yep. The butterfly, undergoing great change and transformation. The energy of the butterfly is with us during periods of transition. Since air is the element of the heart, this change usually involves relationships, or if you love your job, perhaps your career. Since transition is accompanied by some amount of discomfort, be extra patient and kind during this time, especially if the butterfly is you. Let solid friends and activities support you like a cocoon, committing to one daily routine, a meal, practice, a prayer, done at the same time and place will do wonders for lifting a butterfly's spirit. When in balance, the butterfly is cheerful and graceful. When out of balance, the butterfly is fragile and frustrated. To bring into balance, daily routine. Card B is the hummingbird. Positive, enthusiastic, and spiritually resourceful. Inside the tiny hummingbird resides an endless well of energy and positivity. The hummingbird's secret is that it has learned where to gather nectar, and it returns to these sources daily for nourishment and rejuvenation. This sacred elixir springs from many sources, but usually involves nature, creativity, and exploring spirituality. Follow the way of the hummingbird, and you cannot go wrong. Every droplet of life becomes sweet, every moment worth savoring. When in balance, the hummingbird is smart, curious, and loves to learn. When out of balance, the hummingbird is pushy, insistent, and sharp. To bring into balance, take a class. All right, card C, the hyena. Humor, wit, and sarcasm. The hyena personality is a jokester and crowd pleaser, but below the surface, there are unfulfilled dreams to be realized. When the hyena card appears, it's time to reflect on your reliance on sarcasm and humor to express your truth. Are you using jokes to hide old resentments in relationships or to mask things that make you feel uncomfortable discussing? What would happen if you took your goals seriously? When in balance, the hyena is charming, witty, and fun to be around. When out of balance, the hyena is scrappy, petty, and suspicious. To bring into balance, sobriety. We'll share a picture of these cards. The universe is telling us all kinds of things today.
Next week, we will be back, and our topic is self-sabotage and limiting beliefs. The week after that is invoking source. And then the week after that, we're talking about our affirmation challenge and how it went. So we're kind of doing this little mini series leading up to that.
Yes.
But next
Yes.
week, limiting beliefs and self-sabotage. And I am so grateful that you listened in today. Thank you, listeners. We love you.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Radical. The Radical is written and produced by Nicole and Christina.
Listener questions can be emailed to us at theradicalpodnc@gmail.com.
Our Instagram is The Radical Pod.
Music by Van Horton. His Instagram is Van Horton Music.